There's a very important question, and that is, when people are taking DMT or ayahuasca, are they entering the city of Luz? I believe they are.
I think about 20 years ago, I was in Brazil and I met somebody in Copacabana, and Trudy and I, my wife, we got in the back of his car and we mysteriously led out of Rio through the favelas into the jungle. There's a big church, and we handed out this brew, and Trudy and I looked at each other and said, everybody's drinking it, so we did. I drank it in one. And then, after about 40 minutes, there's something coursing through every cell in my body, like an intelligence searching everything. And I am wired to the entire cosmos. I look at the ground, and I see a crack in the ground, and then inside that crack, there's a little flower growing, and it's my brother. Everything. And I realize, for the first time, this is the only genuine religious experience I've ever had. It is communion. It's direct access to the Godhead, whatever you think that is. I have no idea what it is, but there's definitely an intelligence, a higher intelligence at work in you during this experience.
That particular experience anchored me in an implicit sense that God is what there is, even though in our ordinary lives it seems to be not here or concealed by something. It's always here. And the impact of that is that I think internally it's an anchor. It's like the divine is here and now. It's not personal, but it's inside. It's not an abstraction, but something that's more real than anything that we call real. And the way I sense it now, it's kind of like the foundation for a spiritual path that I'm in. That's the path of non-duality. That has to do with really an understanding, has to do with that God is in everything and not separate from, and there's nothing that isn't God. That was the beginning of that, and it was a teaching that was not an idea, but an experience that is alive. It's alive now.
For me, that's the point of doing any of these substances, is to have closer contact with God, or closer contact with spirit or primordial awareness, whatever name you want to give to the sort of boundless ground of primordial presence that we are each an extension of.
I'm very interested in ayahuasca. I think that's a really very interesting substance. There's lots of healing stories out there on ayahuasca.
Well, in many ways, oncologists are pragmatic, since we're dealing with disease that's so deadly. We would like to know exactly how drugs work. But ultimately what matters is whether they do work or not. So that's the ultimate test. We may have beautiful story on the mechanism of action, but if the drug doesn't work, it's just totally irrelevant. So people are willing to suspend their belief in a sense that, we would like to know how the drug works and what implications it has. But if it works, we'll take it and investigate how it works afterwards. So that will be the first step, to show that the drug works. Does it make people live longer? Does it improve their quality of life? Does it make tumors go away, shrink, or stop growing? All of those are positive effects of therapy, if we can get that. And what we have right now is very much inadequate.
there just isn't much awareness. What people know today is what they've heard in the media. LSD makes people jump out the windows. LSD ruins people's chromosomes. And they've really kind of tainted the whole picture. When I sit down and talk to people and they say, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I study psychedelics, LSD, and so forth. What?
Of what I read of psychedelics, there is a potential for treatment of cancer. And there's anecdotal evidence that some of those agents may have a significant anti-cancer activity. There's evidence that they may treat allergies, asthma, perhaps post-traumatic stress disorder, perhaps common things like PMS. So there's a large variety of potential indications where those drugs can be investigated. Problem is that patents on many of those molecules expired years and years ago. So pharmaceutical industry is not really interested in agents like that for two reasons. One is there is no money to be made if there is no patent covering a molecule, and there are all kinds of legal implications since those agents are Schedule I in most of the countries. So there are major, major challenges when it comes to funding of the studies and actually investigating it. From my point of view, it would make sense to do it in a strict scientific manner, do randomized studies, and basically see what are the effects of those molecules. Can they really work the way that shamans describe they work?
We found, first of all, that the ayahuasca subjects who had used ayahuasca within the context of the UDV for at least 10 years, that they were all in very good medical condition and good psychological condition. I should also say that with each of the groups, we did structured psychiatric diagnostic interviews. And there we found that whereas with the UDV ayahuasca using subjects, many of them had past histories of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sociopathic behaviors. All of these had entirely remitted or disappeared since their participation in ayahuasca ceremony in the UDV.
And you start telling them, and most people are fascinated. If people have an open mind and you really start telling them, it was a possibility that these things might be used to treat substance abuse and alcoholism. Terrible. Alcoholism costs society a huge amount of money. And there were really interesting possibilities with that sort of were nipped in the bud. If we could go back and develop new treatments for alcoholism and substance abuse, and not just palliatives, it would be tremendous. And when you start telling the average guy the possibilities, and all you know is what you read in the newspapers. All you know was part of a government propaganda campaign to stop these compounds from being used. What you don't know is what the value these things may really have. Do you know they were used for thousands of years? Every culture used them. We're the only ones who have made them taboo and said, we can't even study them. They're too dangerous and too scary.
The alcoholism entirely disappeared. They stopped drinking, they stopped using drugs, they stopped engaging in antisocial behaviors. It was quite dramatic what we saw.
Wow. Did you find out how did it work? Why?
Well, it's a great mystery. They had powerful psycho-spiritual experiences.
When you talk to reasonable people, they usually are pretty receptive. There are those people whose minds are absolutely closed to anything, not just psychedelics, but anything that's different. They totally resist change. They're rigid thinking. It's the way they were told when they were little kids, and it'll ever be thus. Those people, you never convince them. Whether it's psychedelics or whether it's politics or whether it's anything, they're really hardened in their positions. But I think intelligent people, when you sit down, a lot of times people are surprised when I tell them what I do, and oh, really? And then once you start telling them the details, they go, wow, that's really interesting. What are you doing now? What are you doing next? So I think education is a big part of it. And if we get people educated, I think the attitudes will change a little bit too. We're far enough from the 60s that a lot of that, I think, is starting to fade out.
The experience itself is quite an ordeal. Properly used, ayahuasca can open up parts of yourself not usually available to you. The ayahuasca seemed to access memories I had buried deep within me and brought about other memories and experiences in new light. Taking a substance like ayahuasca is like looking into the clearest mirror imaginable, where you will gain a new perspective on life and see what you have never seen before.
I think similar to the mushrooms, I think those two particularly, because they have cultural traditions behind them, cultural knowledge traditions. So it's not just, adopting the plant as a medicine. It's,
traditional science would say, oh, this is interesting, we should study this ayahuasca thing and analyze it and figure out what the active principle is, and then we'll patent it and sell it back to the natives and screw the natives, basically. It'll add to our armamentarium with which we can deal with malaria and other diseases. And but the real approach would be to say this is these are because they're not like any other drugs, they're not like any other medicines for that matter. They're medicines that integrate. They are medicines in the spiritual sense, so they integrate knowledge and spirituality and physical healing, emotional healing, problem solving, and in that sense, it's an immensely valuable, can make immensely valuable contribution to our society and to our world. See, the way I look back on the Harvard project and what we did, Larry and Albert and myself and our colleagues, our task, our assignment, I would say in retrospect, and Ramdas and I have just written a book about this, we've talked about this, was to find a way to integrate these substances into our culture in a useful way. Obviously, within therapy, that would be one application that had already been tried, but we felt that it was more than that. It could be more than that, and that's why I think we're just coming back to the point where now accepting them again as adjuncts to therapy. And that's a good step in the right direction. But it can be much more than that, you see. It's in all the studies in terms of religion, and all the studies in terms of creativity, and new forms of, all these new social forms that were discovered in the 60s, and a new approach to environmentalism, really changing, causing us to rethink our worldview, can be profound. But you have to find some appropriate form for them. And so therapy is one form, and religion is another form.
Something other than religion and therapy, though.
Yeah, it's hard to know what the form might be, and maybe it won't be in an institutional form. Some people call it a counterculture, but I don't think it's a counterculture because it's not really opposed to the culture. It's not opposed to the dominant culture. It's trying to do something else. It's connecting in other ways. So when you can travel all around the world, you'll meet people who are familiar with DMT, mushrooms, ayahuasca, and you'll have an immediate bond of familiar with it in a deep sense and understand its significance and value. And they're not trying to sell anything. It's not a drug gang or anything like that. It's nothing like that at all. It doesn't involve huge amounts of money. It just involves people helping one another and creating beautiful communities, trying to live in communities, living more in harmony with the land, using the experiences to make changes in the way they relate with one another in families, and the way they prepare and understand for death and dying and curing and illness.
There's libertarian interests who want no restrictions on any kind of use of psychoactive substances. I don't know if I would go as far as to endorse this sort of Coca-Cola model of ayahuasca distribution. Let's sell it in 7-Elevens to 10-year-olds. But by the same token, I don't believe that prohibition is the right answer either. Strict prohibition is not appropriate. So somewhere in the middle is going to be an optimal policy balance where some kind of I think regulation, I think self-regulation by ayahuasqueros or by churches is probably the best route. So the Brazilian government right now is looking at, or it has a committee struck with various members, representatives of the main churches and a few other smaller ones, and they're working together to create a policy on ayahuasca that's suitable for at least those interests.
In the early 1990s, the UDV established a branch of their church in the United States, specifically in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Subsequently, additional nucleos, as they're called, were set up in several other cities, including San Francisco and Los Angeles and Seattle. In the late 90s, the U.S. Customs Department, along with the DEA, intercepted a shipment of ayahuasca to the Santa Fe Church, and in a sense deprived the church of its psychoactive sacrament. The church protested the government action and eventually filed suit in federal court against the U.S. government for depriving them of their rights to engage in their religious practice. They contended that it violated the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which had been passed some years earlier. The case went to federal court in New Mexico, both in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, in 2001, in the fall of 2001. I was the expert medical witness for the UDV, and I testified for 6 hours over the course of 2 days. The hearings themselves, or the trial, lasted, I believe, for 3 weeks. A variety of experts were interviewed, both from the UDV as well as the government, and in the end, the presiding judge, who was a conservative Republican, ruled in favor of the UDV's position, which surprised me because I really didn't think that the UDV would prevail, but they did. The government very quickly appealed the judge's decision. The case was taken to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, where it was first heard by a panel, and the panel ruled 2-1 in favor of the UDV. It was appealed again by the government, taken to the full appeals court, and the ruling again came down in favor of the UDV by an 8-5 margin, and predictably the government appealed that ruling as well, and the case was heard in the U.S. Supreme Court in the fall of 2005, and in February 2006, actually on February 21st, 2006, their decision was announced, and it was a unanimous decision on the side of the UDV, protecting their freedom of religion rights. And this was really an astonishing decision, especially given that it was unanimous. It was also the first argument that Chief Justice Roberts, after his joining the court, wrote himself strongly on behalf of the religion rights of the UDV. And so in a sense, we have now a precedent established by the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, protecting the rights of individuals who utilize plants that have powerful psychoactive and even psychedelic properties when they're utilized as part of their religion.
You know, in terms of when I realized I was in over my head, maybe, so to speak, with some of the stories I was hearing, you know, I don't think I knew that until years later after I'd stopped the study. I was aware of a growing sense of discomfort with what I was doing because I just couldn't explain it. And it seemed to me if I couldn't model and explain what was going on that I was doing and just, you know, bringing people to the edge of these kinds of experiences, it seemed like I ought to. That it was a little irresponsible to be sort of pushing people off the cliff like that without really knowing exactly what it was and accepting and understanding and feeling comfortable with that model. And, you know, I think what began dawning on me after a while once I stopped the study was that I was really dealing with a spiritual phenomenon. I mean, I was able to think of things, or I was able to start to ask myself the questions about some of the phenomenon, which, you know, in retrospect were clearly spiritual. There was contact with non-corporeal entities, angelic beings, you know, experiences of death and after death and encounters with God, for lack of a better word.
And one of the intense moments was a being that came very close, right up to my face, staring me in the face. And it was a kind of tattooed, bejeweled being. It was there was a kind of a stream of jewels over the texture of the face, or the shape of the face, and it was continually changing, but you could tell it was one being, and it just came very close, and it seemed androgynous, you know, and also it smiled. So it was a reflection of, maybe it was my psychedelic higher self. This is always the question. Are we just seeing another layer of ourselves, or is this a being that came from another dimension and, you know, is having an encounter with us, you know?
In terms of how I started understanding this, and it was actually some years after I stopped the research. I wrapped up the studies in '95, and really just had to take a break for a couple of years just to kind of let the work, you know, kind of settle into me, to integrate it, to think about it without having to do more studies and give more people more DMT. Yeah, and I'm also, just in terms of gathering information, which obviously is preliminary to coming up with any, you know, coherent sorts of, you know, well, yeah, the first step in generating a coherent sort of hypothesis for unusual findings is to gather as much information as you can. So what I was doing early on when I was hearing these reports were interpreting them, calling them psychological or brain chemistry aberrations or whatever, that there was a part of the brain that was being dinged that was responsible for the alien appearance phenomenon, or it was a Jungian archetypal thing that was happening to people, or as a Freudian wish fulfillment or projection of unconscious impulses, those kinds of things. Yeah, but or it was a dream, even to take it that far. But you know, every time I tried to interpret what was happening to these people as anything other than it was happening to them, they would just kind of bristle and close down a bit. So after a certain point, I just decided, well, I'll just take these reports at face value. You know, if they're meeting aliens, they're meeting aliens, and I'll just ask them more about it. So in a couple of ways, that was a useful mental experiment. You know, number one, it made people more comfortable opening up to me about some of these things, and it freed me up from having to explain it. I was just kind of, you know, able to gather more information than having to interpret it at that point, because there was just no way I could interpret it. It was only later that I started to fish around for some ways of understanding what people were talking about in some sort of manner that I could, you know, sort of explain as a mechanism of action, some way of explaining how it worked, rather than the more typical ways a psychiatrist might interpret such reports as products of the mind or products of the brain. And even though I had a lot of, you know, a lot of training within the Buddhist monastic, you know, setting that I had worked in, and a lot of my own psychotherapeutic work, psychoanalytic work, I didn't really have a firm footing on spiritual phenomenon themselves. The meditation work was more just as far as mind training to a large extent, and how the mind worked. And my psychotherapeutic, psychoanalytic training was more in terms of psychopathology and how people's personalities functioned or malfunctioned. But once I was really dipping into spiritual phenomenon, and especially with respect to just, you know, these non-corporeal encounters in the non-corporeal worlds that people were entering, what I had trained in previously didn't really help me, didn't really provide an overarching framework that made sense, that I could sort of heart-to-heart empathize with the volunteers over it. So it really hasn't been since the, you know, it's not really been any more recent than just the last year or two that I've just through my own work and study, have started, working within a particular, spiritual system that I think could contain and hold and kind of run with people's experiences that they're having then. Yeah, I just don't think I was mature enough in some ways. It's maybe psychologically I was mature enough and scientifically, but I don't think I was spiritually mature enough. I started that study when I was 38, and that's pretty young for that kind of work, really blowing people's minds regularly and having them, through what I was doing, just be in these places. I just don't think I had my feet on the ground spiritually firmly enough.
Called La Medicina, the medicine. And the medicine is there to heal. And the healing is thorough. It's not like getting a checkup at the dentist. It's not like, going on a macrobiotic diet for the summer. It's not like that. When the healing happens, it happens in every corner of every part that is yourself. When the healing happens, it's like a blowtorch in your soul. It lights up everything. It's not like there's any part of you that sits out the healing process. You're completely and totally immersed into it, down to the marrow of your bones. And so when you realize in the ayahuasca ceremony that love is the only worthy thing, it's not a realization happening up here in the top of your brain. It's a realization happening in the full and complete and total you that is connected with the full and complete total everybody and everything else, and you really get it.
Ayahuasca can be seen as a doorway, a link between the dimensions. The galactic world, the cosmic perspective. And ayahuasca is like a deep immersion into that kind of experiential understanding of unity. And this unity is liberating. It's a transforming experience. Ayahuasca teaches that we are it, we are nature, we are not separate from it.
What you see, I think, is the morphogenetic field, the invisible world that holds everything together. You don't have to spend 20 years around the ashram.
Ayahuasca to me is a very, very feminine spirit. It's a feminine experience. It's an experience of let go, of surrender, of nurturing, of love, of light, of the heart. It's a holographic library.
Feels like I'm being bombarded by some sort of ancient knowledge, universal consciousness.
A lot of fear comes up, and because it's such a sort of mysterious and unknown experience that is going to be intense and trying.
It really necessitates showing up.
This path of working with this medicine isn't an easy path, and I'd say that it requires commitment and it requires tenacity and bravery.
It kind of opened up this well of emotion and guilt and anger.
I wasn't willing to let go of what I needed to let go of without a fight. So I suffered and so much pain.
Nuestra identidad como nativos es que somos hijos de plantas sagradas que venimos trabajando en favor de la humanidad.
This medicine somehow allows you to dive deep inside your own mind and inside your heart, your feelings. It has an ancient memory.
seemed to me that these things were like deep inside of me. You know, that the medicine seemed to kind of get out. You know, I knew it had to come out. I wanted it to come out. I'd asked for that in the ceremonies. I'd asked for the Mother Earth to help me heal.
I've been able to reevaluate so many of my experiences and turn them into empowering experiences and lessons, rather than just feeling like they were things that happened to me that hurt me.
Shamans do a shamanic journey with drumming or with plants. It's for the purposes of healing. It's not just for fun. It's often not fun. It can often be quite painful and difficult and involve challenges, like intensive psychotherapy, working through difficult, you know, scary kind of things. But it does involve working with the spirits of the natural world.
And the job is the healing. The healing. Not healing. The healing. The healing of spirit, the healing of human beings, the healing of society, the healing of something far greater that is terribly, terribly amiss. Ayahuasca, you can think of as, yeah, you know, we did this ayahuasca and it was really amazing. Okay, that's one way to think about it. But if you pay attention to what this force, this healing force is doing, it's moving out. Just years ago, this was the purview of shamans and a few people who hung out with them and the occasional Terence and Dennis McKenna types who trooped on through, and that was it. You know, ayahuasca let itself out of the bag, and it's now moving itself through society. And yes, some people will have some bad experiences. And yes, there are some creeps pretending to be shamans, and that's a problem. But the greatest thing that's happening with ayahuasca is a thing of goodness. And this is medicine first.
It really stripped the layers of, only way I can explain it is it almost breaks the barrier between the conscious and the subconscious mind. And you're able to see things that you really didn't know existed. You know, you always, I think our whole life, or my whole life, you think you do things for a certain reason. And what the plant teaches you is a lot of times it's a completely different reason why we're doing it. And by stripping that barrier down, it does something to your heart. I'm a different person. I didn't expect this when I came here this time. I'm a different person today than I was a week and a half ago. I'm softer, you know.
And until you've drunk it, these are just words. These are just stories from people who've gone and had the brew. And once you put it in your body, then you'll discover that you're just part of the calling. And ayahuasca, whatever it is, as unfathomable as it is, as powerful as it is, as crazy as it is working its way through us for one reason and one reason only, and that is we need the healing, and it is here to do that. Thank you.
I came to have the ayahuasca experience because my life had gradually over many years become less social, more social isolation. Kind of a problem I've had all my life, but when I was young and dashing, it was much easier to get along. And I really wanted to just love more in my life.
The participation of an ayahuasca experience takes place within a ceremonial scenario, typically held within a ceremonial house called a maloka. Initiated at night to facilitate and fully engage with the mystical visions one encounters with the ayahuasca. You'd arrive there and the maloka would be lit by candlelight. Mattresses circle the outer edges of the maloka with an altar in the middle. The altar housing various props that gets used throughout the ceremony for various ritual purposes. incense, sage, flower water, and the ayahuasca itself.
It is time to unite the minds and the hearts toward a good rite of passage of the earth.
Ya llegó el día, llegó el amanecer. Ya reconocemos de que todos somos uno.
I'm still fairly new to this, so I may just be completely wrong with this. I've searched many avenues of life for inspiration, and it seems what happens within the space of one's own mind during an ayahuasca experience is the most fascinating occurrence within the whole universe. And when I experienced it, I thought, this is it.
I think ayahuasca can show us how beautiful we are inside and what kinds of possibilities we have for love and for actions of kindness. One of the great assets of ayahuasca is that it's plants. And, you know, what better way to root ourselves back into the web of nature and a compassion for this web of life than through the plants themselves. You know, the plants are talking to us.
And there's just nothing compared to this. I mean, this is just a 10-day experience, and I really feel strongly that it's made a change, and one that's very positive and one that I wanted and looked for. At one point in one of the experiences, it's like my mind reviewed the history of the world, the civilizations in that, and I became aware of how we mess things up and how civilization has always messed things up. You know, the kingdoms and the Rome, and just within a very short period of time, I reviewed all that stuff with a very, very detailed understanding of how that works. And in my own life, reviewing that, to actually understand that compassion and mercy and kindness it's an actual rule of life. I mean, it's not a optional thing if you want to be open and loving and live. That's the way. I mean, it's really a fact. No matter how many years you spend, or I spent, trying to wonder about it or not practice it, I see it so clearly now, and I want more.
With ayahuasca, it is a, you know, very often in the first, onset occurs after about 45 minutes to an hour. The first 20, 30, 40 minutes, one might have very powerful visual phenomena. Sometimes it could be just looking at seeing a very colorful grid that seems to be, an organic grid. There seems to be some kind of life force pulsating within it. Very often people report thematic visions, which often have symbolic significance to what they're going through during their lives. I asked, I did a kind of a free-form life story interview with all of our ayahuasca-using subjects, and I spoke with a number of other members of this religion, and I asked them what was their first experience like. And many of these individuals who were leading very perilous lives, taking high risks with health, alienated from family, from society in general, reported visions of the direction their lives were going, up to that point, which was really on the road to ruin, on the road to more personal injury, more suffering, more grief all around them, and they would have visions of being in perilous situations leading to their demise. For instance, one man told me that he had a vision of being in a canoe on the river going over rapids, the canoe out of control, and he knew that because of the way he had led his life, the canoe would capsize and he would drown, and it would be a horrible death. And then as he prayed for help, for salvation, he suddenly envisioned with him in the canoe Maestri Gabriel, who was the founder of the church, who had achieved mythical status since his death in the early 1970s. And Maestri Gabriel then steadied the boat and allowed this man to survive. And he felt that it was through the intercession of the Maestri that he had survived the perils of his ordeal.
I came here very clearly to, I don't know if the word is finish, but to really consolidate or finish my healing from cancer. And I do expect after 3 months I want to be clear from cancer. And I think I'm in the right place. I really felt it very strongly the first day I arrived. When the doctor told me about all the possibilities, the radio, the chemo and the hormonal treatment, they sounded so foreign to me. They're so weird that to get better you had to get worse. I don't know, it just really didn't. I just really felt really strongly that it wasn't the way. And it's been a hard way, even nutritionally, and it's a long journey. But it's worth it. I've learned a lot from it. When you take ayahuasca, you sometimes go through pain or through whatever emotions there are maybe stuck in the body. This is how I see it. And once I allow myself to just feel that, once I go through that, a lot of beauty of understanding comes through. And I really am able to understand maybe where that emotion came from or how I feel about things. The detoxifying qualities of ayahuasca are very powerful. It's called also Planta de la Vida, and it's very difficult to kill it, which is great. Apparently you rip it apart, you take leaves off, and it still lives, and so that's beautiful.
My name is Amélie Nothomb. I come from Belgium. I'm a writer. I write fiction novels. I came here because I have a huge problem of hating myself, and for so many years, and I wanted to quit that. So I think the main reason why I hated myself was that my family used to tell me on several ways that I was ugly, intelligent but ugly. So I felt very bad because of that, and even what happened being successful in writing couldn't cure that, because still feeling ugly, still seeing an ugly person in the mirrors, that's very painful. So finally I got a voice in me telling me always hateful things, not only ugly, but you're not only ugly, you're bad, because you know, when you see an ugly person, finally you think that's a bad person, that person deserves to be ugly, so she's bad, she's mean, she's useless, she harms everybody. So I was really fed up with that, and I arrived here, and I had ayahuasca ceremonies for the very first time. At the beginning it was interesting. There was sometimes a voice telling me, come on, you're not so bad, with right things. But the fourth ceremony was really an event. At that ceremony, Mother Ayahuasca took me in her arms, told me that I was her beloved child, and gave me such a love that I could never imagine would exist. And I could have the deep feeling of that love for about 2 hours. I cannot describe that feeling. She was holding me in her arms in the air, and in my whole body I felt that so powerful love, which has nothing to do with human love, you know, it's really the love of a goddess. And she was keeping telling me, you're just my beloved child and I love you, and I could see how powerful she was. So to feel love from such a powerful goddess, of course this was wonderful for my self-esteem, because I know that she doesn't lie. If she tells me that she loves me, it's true. So there's something to love in me.
I was told so many things of life as it would be when I returned home, which involves healing. I'm a physiotherapist, and mainly relates to physical healing, but every day of my work it seems like I'm exposed to so much more on an energetic level and bombarded by people's energies, and I wondered at some points why it would be so draining. Why is it so draining? It's just ailments, it's impairments, you know. But I see now the energy and the influence on myself, and now shedding that energy through assisting someone is very important as well. Shaking it off, letting it go, and not holding on and carrying the baggage of other people who need that healing and deeper healing. I've developed faith and I have trust, and the intention is there, but to surrender to all of these is all I can do. Is all I can do right now. The Temple of the Way of Light is pure happiness, an opportunity to experience light, an opportunity to experience life, and an introduction to higher purpose.
Absolutely, it has a place, especially my country's America, where people's minds are all focused on consumerism and materialism and the rat race, just getting by, this incredible busyness that has no real heartful purpose to it. It's like they're being led by forces of greed that you know, you have to liberate yourself from that. And I think ayahuasca could be very helpful in doing that. And I can see where it would be a huge threat to big pharma, and big business would be very threatened by something that would make people want to maybe work less, have less material possessions, and live life more abundantly. I don't think you can just suddenly, you know, have this in a society and that everyone's going to participate. I don't think so. But gradually, people will probably catch on. When they see their neighbor come back from one of these experiences, and a person that they knew is, you know, maybe caught up in the rat race and had some neuroticism and that sort of thing, and they see them come back and they've slowed down and they're kind and loving and are able to make some meaningful changes in their life, then they're going to see the value in it. And then they may see the value in, well, it's not all easy, but this is a worthwhile process.
Coming together and spending time with people like that is just, in and of itself, outside of everything else that happened here, so very healing, you know, because it gives hope and it gives inspiration and it gives me more belief in my fellow humans.
It's not something, it's not a new age thing, it's not something that sort of happened in the 60s. It's actually been here for centuries. And there is this memory, which you get that sense that by taking it, there is a memory, as an ancient memory of what has been, what perhaps we've been part of at one time, and what we've lost.
So my name's Natasha Lang. I've come from London, and here I am. I've come with my mother. I came because 2 years ago I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I decided not to take the conventional route since the treatment was so brutal and damaging, and I thought I didn't want to make irreversible damage to myself, and I had a good chance of being well if I worked on being well rather than doing things that I could never recover from. That's how I felt. Coming out here, we've been here for it's nearly 2 weeks, however long it is, and working with these ceremonies. The first ceremony, you know, it's just so heart-opening, so touching to be in an environment where not just supported by the nature, the vibration of the nature, of the jungle, of the animals, the sound of the jungle, but then the singing of the maestros and maestras when they tune in, and the vibration, it's like they're tuning you up to the vibration of nature, of sort of abundant love, of abundant compassion, which is what the earth is giving us all the time. And gradually throughout these days I feel like I've really relaxed, and I can feel the vibrations changing in my body. And just to know that that's possible on this world, to have that vibration that is so, it is healing, so nourishing. I do feel the benefit massively from being here, and I'm thinking of coming back maybe to spend 2 months and work on what they call a dieter, where I work with one of the shamans and they put me on a very simple diet, and then work with specific plants for tumours. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm sure it can only be beneficial. Just to be here is healing in itself. Even I'd recommend it to anybody to come out and have this experience, to remember what we're capable of as a people. You know, that it doesn't have to be the way it's gone in the commercial Western world. This is the competitiveness, and we can be in a good way, and so that's also, it gives a lot of encouragement or hope to the future of our life as a humanity.
Na 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 Me conduz e me ensina desse poder. Meu coração é o meu sinal. Vem, amor, me faz viver com tua força divinal. Sou filho desse poder. Meu coração é o meu sinal. Vem paz, tua vinda é natural. Vem que o amor me traz, no silêncio é o teu sinal. Vem paz, tua vinda é natural. Vem que o amor me traz, no silêncio é o teu sinal. Vem, luz, me ilumina, sonho dourado do astral. Me conduz e me ensina, o teu brilho é o meu sinal. Vem, luz, me ilumina, sonho dourado do astral. Me conduz e me ensina, o teu brilho é o meu sinal. Vem, amor, me faz viver com tua força divinal. Sou filho desse poder, meu coração é o meu sinal. Vem, amor, me faz viver com tua força divinal. Sou filho desse poder, meu coração é o meu sinal. Vem paz, tua vinda é natural. Vem que o amor me traz, no silêncio é o teu sinal. Vem paz, tua vinda é natural. Vem que o amor me traz, no silêncio é o teu sinal.
Ayahuaska urkumanta Taki muiki Ayahuaska urkumanta Taki muiki Chuya chuya hampi kuini Miski ñuño cuerpo chaita Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Ayahuasca curandera, taki taki muiki. Ayahuasca curandera, taki taki muiki. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Ayahuasca lucerito manta, taki taki muiki. Ayahuasca lucerito manta, taki taki muiki. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Ayahuasca chacrunera, taki taki muiki. Ayahuasca chacrunera, taki taki muiki. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita.
Ayahuasca chacrupanga, taki taki muiki. Ayahuasca chacrupanga, taki taki muiki. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita.
Ayahuasca pinturera, taki taki muiki. Ayahuasca pinturera, taki taki muiki. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Ayahuasca urcumanta, taki taki muiki. Ayahuasca urcumanta, taki taki muiki. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita. Chuya chuya hampi kuini, miskinyo cuerpo chaita.